Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda.
Just 4 days before the 4th of November 2004 U.S. presidential election, a newly published tape emerged in the news, shaking up the already tense race between George W. Bush and John Kerry. The election was heavily influenced by the foreign policy decisions made in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, with both candidates' stances on national security under intense scrutiny.
The American people need to know we're facing a different enemy than we have ever faced.
In our determination to destroy, capture, kill Osama bin Laden.
The tape, published by Al Jazeera, showed a recovered Osama bin Laden, who claimed responsibility for the September 11th attacks more directly than ever before. The staging of the recording, in which bin Laden attempted to present himself as a legitimate leader addressing the nation he attacked, was a chilling reminder that the most wanted man on the planet must have been feeling secure wherever he was hiding. Simultaneously at CIA headquarters in Virginia, the special unit tasked with finding bin Laden was grappling with frustration as nearly every lead had gone cold. This situation was particularly exasperating given that, just 3 years earlier, they had believed they were close to capturing him. By the end of the 2001 U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, al-Qaeda fighters had retreated to the eastern part of the country, where they fortified themselves in the caves of Tora Bora. American intelligence agencies suspected that bin Laden was among them. Supported by the U.S., local Afghan tribes fought through the rugged terrain, with heavy airstrikes aiding their advance. However, by the time the battle concluded, bin Laden had already escaped. Only about 20 people were arrested after the fighting, leaving the CIA empty-handed and having missed what may have been a critical opportunity to capture al-Qaeda's leader. The failure to capture bin Laden at Tora Bora was not just a tactical error, but also a significant blow to U.S. credibility. The caves of Tora Bora had been heavily fortified over years, designed to withstand both Soviet and American attacks. These were not just makeshift hideouts. They were complex networks with stockpiles of supplies, capable of sustaining fighters for extended periods. The rugged terrain, combined with the strategic withdrawal of al-Qaeda fighters, made the battle difficult for U.S. forces, who relied heavily on local Afghan militia, whose loyalties were often divided. The decision not to commit U.S. ground troops in greater numbers was later criticized, as it allowed bin Laden and other key figures to slip away into the tribal regions of Pakistan, where they would continue to evade capture for nearly a decade. Yet, one of those arrested during the Tora Bora operations would eventually provide a valuable lead. Mohammed al-Qahtani was initially unknown to investigators and denied any connection to al-Qaeda, claiming he was in Afghanistan for falconry. However, when his fingerprints were checked, they matched records in the U.S. system. Investigators discovered that just weeks before the September 11th attacks, Qahtani had attempted to enter the United States. His suspicious behavior, carrying $2,800 in cash and traveling on a one-way ticket, prompted a customs agent to deny him entry, suspecting that he might be attempting to immigrate illegally. This denial would later be seen as a missed opportunity to prevent what was to come. The investigators soon uncovered another crucial piece of evidence. On the same day that Mohammed al-Qahtani was at Orlando International Airport, a call was made from the airport to an al-Qaeda phone number in the United Arab Emirates, a number that had been under surveillance. The timing of Qahtani's presence at the airport and the call's placement triggered an urgent response from investigators, who scrambled to connect these events. FBI agents meticulously sifted through hours of airport surveillance footage, hoping to uncover more leads. Their persistence paid off when they identified a car that had been rented by Mohammed Atta, the ringleader of the September 11th attacks, who piloted American Airlines Flight 11 into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. This critical discovery led investigators to conclude that Atta had been at the airport to pick up Qahtani. It is widely believed that Qahtani was meant to be the 20th hijacker intended to board United Airlines Flight 93, the flight that ultimately crashed in Pennsylvania when passengers bravely attempted to retake control from the hijackers. With this new information, Qahtani was subjected to intense interrogation. His cooperation, along with that of other al-Qaeda captives over the following months and years, provided investigators with invaluable insights into the inner workings of the terrorist organization. For instance, in March 2002, Abu Zubaydah, a key logistics coordinator for al-Qaeda, was captured and revealed to the CIA that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the group's operational commander, had masterminded the September 11th attacks. The capture and interrogation of key al-Qaeda operatives like Zubaydah and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed were pivotal moments in the war on terror. These figures were not just foot soldiers, they were architects of terror, deeply involved in planning and executing operations that killed thousands. The intelligence gathered from these interrogations helped to unravel al-Qaeda's complex network, but it also highlighted the organization's resilience and its ability to adapt to intense scrutiny. Despite these advances, the CIA remained in the dark about bin Laden's exact location. They began mapping relationships within al-Qaeda, trying to identify who had direct contact with bin Laden and how he communicated from his undisclosed hiding place. They also scrutinized his private network, including family members who could be located, but found no direct communication between them and bin Laden. One year later, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed himself was apprehended. During his interrogation, Qahtani disclosed that in July 2001, in preparation for the attacks, he had been introduced by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti, a figure previously unknown to the CIA. Al-Kuwaiti was responsible for training Qahtani in operational security. These revelations helped the CIA gain a clearer understanding of al-Qaeda's structure, which included a hierarchy of command and planning layers, less trained operatives, and Osama bin Laden at the top as the leader. Despite these advances, the CIA remained in the dark about bin Laden's exact location. They began mapping relationships within al-Qaeda, trying to identify who had direct contact with bin Laden and how he communicated from his undisclosed hiding place. They also scrutinized his private network, including family members who could be located, but found no direct communication between them and bin Laden. However, it was known that bin Laden continued to send out messages. Over the years, new audio tapes surfaced, confirming that he was still in contact with al-Qaeda's leadership. Understanding that bin Laden relied on couriers to transmit information, the CIA shifted its strategy to focus on identifying and tracking these couriers. The goal was to use the courier network as a means to trace bin Laden's movements and eventually locate his hiding place. This would become a pivotal part of the effort to bring the world's most wanted man to justice. In mid-January 2004, Kurdish security forces arrested a man named Hassan Gul, who was carrying a letter addressed to Osama bin Laden. Gul was handed over to American authorities, and during his interrogation, he provided crucial information that shifted the investigation's focus. Gul revealed that a key figure, already on the CIA's radar, could be instrumental in locating bin Laden: Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti, whom Gul identified as bin Laden's personal courier. As the investigation zeroed in on Kuwaiti, conflicting information about his role within al-Qaeda began to surface. Hassan Gul described Kuwaiti as a significant player, someone who was well acquainted with both Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his successor, Abu Faraj al-Libi. However, when Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was interrogated, he downplayed Kuwaiti's importance, claiming that he had long since retired and was no longer active in the organization. Similarly, when Abu Faraj al-Libi was arrested in Pakistan in May 2005, he too denied that Kuwaiti held any major role. Further confusion arose when investigators questioned Hambali, the former leader of al-Qaeda's Southeast Asian affiliate. Hambali confirmed that Kuwaiti was indeed involved, managing a safe house in Karachi during the time the Taliban were fleeing Afghanistan. The contradictory testimonies only heightened the CIA's interest in Kuwaiti, yet the problem remained. Very little was known about him. Even the name Kuwaiti was not his real name, but an alias, translating to the father of Ahmed from Kuwait, making identification even more challenging. While important insights were gleaned from prisoner interrogations, the methods used to extract this information were highly controversial. Many prisoners were subjected to enhanced interrogation techniques, a euphemism for abusive treatment, including torture, such as waterboarding. A 2014 Senate Intelligence Committee report later concluded that these techniques were ineffective and did not contribute to obtaining information about bin Laden. Moreover, there was a broader concern that the CIA's actions, seemingly operating outside the rule of law, could ultimately harm national security, a debate that extends beyond the scope of this narrative. Despite the intensive efforts, investigators found themselves at a dead end once more. It wasn't until 2007 that a breakthrough occurred, not from the CIA's own work, but from a foreign intelligence service that provided the key information. The true identity of Kuwaiti was revealed: Ibrahim Saeed Ahmed, a Pakistani whose family had relocated to Kuwait. While it had taken 2 years to uncover his name, it would take several more years before they could locate him. In June 2010, a critical development occurred when Kuwaiti and his brother altered the way they communicated via their cell phones. This change enabled the NSA to geolocate the calls. The NSA had received phone numbers linked to Kuwaiti from a third country and began intercepting communications. Amidst the monitored conversations, one individual stood out, fitting Kuwaiti's profile. He spoke a mix of Arabic and Pashto, the language of northwestern Pakistan, and when questioned by a friend in the Persian Gulf about his whereabouts, he cryptically responded that he was with the people he was with before. This individual also took extraordinary precautions to avoid being tracked, keeping his phone off most of the time, and only inserting the battery when he was near Peshawar. As it became increasingly likely that this was Kuwaiti, the CIA intensified efforts to track him on the ground. In August 2010, a Pakistani CIA agent successfully identified Kuwaiti in his car in Peshawar. He was then discreetly followed to his home, where investigators were taken aback by what they found: a large, fortified compound. This discovery would prove to be a significant piece of the puzzle in the hunt for Osama bin Laden. The agents had initially assumed that once Kuwaiti had been identified, their task would be to monitor him until he eventually led them to Osama bin Laden's hideout. However, when they observed the massive compound where Kuwaiti lived, a new theory emerged. They might already be at the hideout. The possibility that Kuwaiti was living under the same roof as bin Laden became increasingly plausible. Despite some uncertainty in Washington, it became clear that bin Laden had likely been located, marking the final stage of a manhunt that had been a top priority since the September 11th attacks. The responsibility now shifted from intelligence agents to a special operations team, which had limited information about what they might encounter during the raid. On May 1st, 2011, at 11 p.m. local time, 2 Black Hawk helicopters, equipped with advanced stealth technology, took off from Jalalabad airfield, heading towards bin Laden's compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. The mission was fraught with complications, particularly because the United States had decided not to inform the Pakistani government about the operation. This decision required the Navy SEALs to fly under the radar, both literally and figuratively, to avoid detection by Pakistani forces, a challenging feat, especially considering that bin Laden's compound was situated right next to a Pakistani military academy. The story of how this raid unfolded is nothing short of remarkable. The SEALs had trained meticulously for this moment, and now they were finally executing the operation that would bring an end to one of the most significant manhunts in history. Upon arrival, one of the helicopters experienced mechanical issues and had to make a controlled crash landing within the compound. Despite this unexpected setback, the SEALs swiftly adapted to the situation and proceeded with the raid. Over the course of the next 40 minutes, the SEAL team methodically cleared the compound, encountering and neutralizing resistance as they advanced through the building. On the third floor of the main building, they found and killed Osama bin Laden. His body was quickly secured, and the SEALs gathered valuable intelligence materials from the compound before preparing to exfiltrate. The team then moved to destroy the damaged Black Hawk to prevent its advanced technology from falling into the wrong hands. They completed their mission, and the remaining SEALs and their captured materials were extracted by the backup helicopter. The operation, known as Operation Neptune Spear, was a historic success, bringing closure to a nearly decade-long pursuit of the mastermind behind the September 11 attacks. The death of Osama bin Laden marked a significant moment in the global fight against terrorism, and the story of this raid remains a testament to the dedication, precision, and bravery of the Special Operations Forces who carried it out. However, the impact of bin Laden's death rippled far beyond the immediate aftermath. In the United States, the announcement of his death brought a surge of national pride, with spontaneous celebrations erupting in cities across the country. President Barack Obama, who authorized the mission, saw a temporary boost in his approval ratings, with many viewing the successful operation as a defining moment of his presidency. Internationally, reactions were mixed. While many countries expressed support for the operation, some, particularly in the Muslim world, viewed bin Laden's killing as a martyrdom that could inspire further extremism. In Pakistan, the raid sparked outrage and a diplomatic crisis, with the government facing intense criticism for either being complicit in hiding bin Laden or for its inability to detect a U.S. military operation on its soil. The Pakistani military, already under pressure, found itself in a difficult position as the raid exposed vulnerabilities in its air defense systems. The intelligence gathered from bin Laden's compound provided valuable insights into al-Qaeda's operations and future plans. Analysts spent months sifting through the materials, which included hard drives, documents, and personal correspondence. These findings led to the disruption of several planned attacks, and offered a clearer picture of the terrorist network's structure post-bin Laden. Yet, the death of Osama bin Laden did not mark the end of al-Qaeda. The organization, while weakened, adapted to the loss of its leader by decentralizing its operations, with regional affiliates gaining more autonomy. In the years that followed, groups like al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, and al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, AQIM, continued to carry out attacks and spread their ideology. The rise of the Islamic State, ISIS, also shifted the focus of global counterterrorism efforts as this new and brutal organization began to eclipse al-Qaeda in its notoriety. The successful execution of Operation Neptune Spear had significant geopolitical repercussions. For the United States, it reaffirmed the country's commitment to tracking down those responsible for the September 11th attacks, regardless of the time it took or the resources required. The raid also demonstrated the effectiveness of U.S. Special Operations Forces and the capabilities of American intelligence agencies when they work in concert. For Pakistan, the raid on Abbottabad was deeply humiliating. The fact that bin Laden had been living for years in a compound close to a military academy in a garrison town raised serious questions about the competence and integrity of the Pakistani military and intelligence services. Relations between the U.S. and Pakistan, already strained, deteriorated further in the aftermath of the raid. Pakistan's government faced accusations from both domestic and international critics who questioned whether elements within the Pakistani state had been protecting bin Laden. The raid also influenced U.S. policy in the region. The success of Operation Neptune Spear emboldened proponents of drone warfare and targeted killings as effective tools in the fight against terrorism. This approach, however, also drew criticism for its ethical implications and the potential for collateral damage, which could fuel further anti-American sentiment in the region. The death of Osama bin Laden was a significant symbolic victory in the war on terror, but it did not bring an end to global terrorism. Al-Qaeda, though weakened, remained a threat, and the rise of ISIS posed new challenges for the international community. The decentralized nature of modern terrorist networks made them more difficult to combat, as local cells and lone actors could carry out attacks with minimal coordination from a central command. In response, counterterrorism strategies evolved to address these new realities. Intelligence sharing between nations increased, and efforts were made to combat the root causes of extremism, such as poverty, lack of education, and political instability. However, these efforts were often complicated by the complex political dynamics in regions like the Middle East and North Africa, where various factions vied for power and influence. The legacy of bin Laden's death also extended to the broader debate over civil liberties and national security. The use of enhanced interrogation techniques, targeted killings, and mass surveillance programs sparked intense public and legal debates in the US and other countries. While some argued that these measures were necessary to protect national security, others warned that they could undermine the very democratic values that nations were trying to defend. The hunt for Osama bin Laden, culminating in the successful raid on his compound in Abbottabad, is a story of perseverance, intelligence, and military precision. It is also a story that highlights the complexities and challenges of the global fight against terrorism. While bin Laden's death marked a significant milestone, it also underscored the ongoing nature of this struggle and the need for continued vigilance and cooperation among nations. As the world continues to confront the threat of terrorism, the lessons learned from the hunt for bin Laden will remain relevant. The importance of reliable intelligence, the need for international collaboration, and the ethical dilemmas posed by counterterrorism efforts will continue to shape the strategies and policies of nations around the world. The operation that led to bin Laden's death may have closed one chapter in the war on terror, but it also opened new ones, reminding us that the fight against extremism is far from over. The global community must remain committed to addressing the root causes of terrorism and working together to build a more secure and just world.